Hey everybody, welcome to the video. Let's go over the 10-game MLB DFS slate for today on Draftkings. But before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, you might as well hit that subscribe button. I'm here all season long trying to help you guys become better MLB DFS players, and I cover other sports as well. So if you're going to keep coming back to the channel each and every single day, or each and every single week, you might as well hit that subscribe button and turn the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new content. And if you don't follow me on social media, I'm at Pennell16 on Twitter, CPenn16 over on IG. And if you want some more content over on Patreon, always much appreciated, but wait until the first of the month because Patreon charges on the first of the month, and look, it's August 30th, so just wait a day or two. I forget how many days are in August. It's either 30 or 31. Don't remember, but wait till the first of the month if you are interested, but link is in the description below for that. But if you're not interested, that's fine, but let's just dive into today's slate. So, some decent pitching options here. I like Maeda quite a bit, Snell, Woodruff, and then we have a YOLO punt option and Dan Dunning here at only 4,500. But we will start up top with the two aces. And we have Kenta Maeda at 9,600. He draws an elite matchup here versus Detroit. Now, you got to be honest, it's going to be hard to pick between Maeda and Blake Snell. You could play both. I'm not sure if I'd really recommend playing both because I want some expensive bats on this slate. But both draw about as good matchups as you possibly can. Miami's been awful versus lefties, and Detroit's been awful versus righties. But Maeda's been very consistent so far this season. If we're just going to look at his game log really quick, I mean, he's had points of 23, 38, where he almost had the no-hitter versus Milwaukee, 21, 13, 28, and 20. He's been very good. The strikeouts have been there as well. I mean, 7, 12, then kind of mediocre at 5, 4, 6, 6. But it's getting the job done. He's not a huge strikeout pitcher, but looking at his past as 2 seasons combined, he's actually at 28% for his strikeout rate, only a 31% hard contact rate. But the thing I'm most interested here is the matchup versus the Detroit Tigers. They're striking out 30% of the time to righties so far this season. Only a 77 WRC plus and a 214 batting average. So love the spot here for Kenta Maeda. I feel very comfortable with him in my lineups. 3.78 runs for the Tigers today, 64% chance for the win for the Minnesota Twins, and 6 strikeouts for Maeda. So I think he's an excellent SP1 option. If you want to save a little bit of cash, you have Blake Snell at 9,200. Again, the matchup for Blake Snell is just about as good as it is for Kenta Maeda. Miami on the flip side versus lefties, they are just absolute trash. 79 WRC plus, a 28% K rate, 141 ISO, and a 226 batting average. The problem with Blake Snell to start the season was that his pitch count was very, very low, but we've seen him reach over 100 pitches in his last start. I believe he had 101 pitches, so I can just glance at. Yeah, 101 pitches, struck out 9. This was against the Blue Jays, scored 23 fantasy points. So pitch count's no issue here, and I love the spot for Blake Snell. We know when he's on his game, he can be one of the better pitchers in baseball. Love the strikeout upside. He had a 33% K rate last season and this season combined. So I think Blake Snell and Kenta Maeda are both excellent options. I guess you could play both together, but I'm not sure how easy it's going to be to fit in bats that I like. So you're probably going to pick one. If I had to pick one, I'm not honestly sure which one I'd go with yet. They're both going to be pitching in pretty solid pitchers park. I mean, Blake Snell in Miami, then Kenta Maeda in Detroit. So we can't really narrow it down to that either. Now, there's no team total out for the Marlins. I'd have to imagine it's going to be one of the lowest on the slate, if not the lowest. So he's also a little bit cheaper. So maybe Blake Snell's the better play over Maeda. But both are excellent options here. Can't go wrong with either. Then more of an SP2 option, we have Brandon Woodruff at 8,200. And he crushed the Pirates earlier this season. I believe that's when he had 13 strikeouts, if I remember correctly. Pull up his game log really quick. But yeah, versus the Pirates, he's had one start versus them. He scored 37 fantasy points, went 6.1 innings, but struck out 10. For some reason, I was thinking it was 13 strikeouts. Might be thinking of a Tyler Chatwood start, to be honest. But anyway, yeah, Woodruff's been fine this season. He's not setting the world on fire, but he's had obviously some really good games. 37 points and 25 points versus Cincy in his last start. Outside of those 2 games, though, he's kind of been mediocre. I mean, the points really haven't been there, but the Pirates are one of the worst teams in baseball versus righties. I mean, these first 3 pitchers we talked about both draw about the best matchups you can ask for. Snell, lefty versus Miami, Maeda, righty versus Detroit, and then Woodruff, a righty versus Pittsburgh. 60 WRC plus, 257 WOBA, 210 batting average, and only a 116 ISO. So love the spot for Woodruff, and I also like this price tag as well. Only about 3.4 runs for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and very heavy favorite in Vegas at 68% chance for the win. And Woodruff's got a near 30% K rate, so love the spot for Woodruff, and I think he's an excellent SP2 option. If you want a complete punt play in Dan Dunning at 4,500, I think he is viable. He looked pretty good in his first start. Now, he ended up giving up 3 runs, but that was at the very end of the start. Very end, that's when he got pulled, but he was looking great. Like, he was looking fantastic, but I will say that was versus the Tigers, and I just got done talking about Maeda versus the Tigers and how bad they've been versus righties, so the matchup's not as soft. But it's really kind of still soft versus the Royals. They're not that good of a team, and he struck out 7 in his first outing. Again, he gave up 3 runs, but that was at the very tail end. Didn't go 5 innings, but still scored 14 fantasy points, and his price is the same. They didn't move his price up, which is kind of surprising because we know this guy's a better not better prospect, but a decently touted prospect for the White Sox, and I think he should be more than 4,500. Now, the matchup versus the Royals, not as great as it is versus Detroit, but still a 25% K rate this season, only a 91 WRC plus, and overall the numbers aren't great. So at 4,500, we don't expect greatness. We're kind of just hoping he gets, 8 to 15 points, somewhere around there. I think we'll take it. I mean, 10 points would even get the job done, and he's going to allow us to fit in guys like, Devers, Soto, the big hitters on this slate, which we'll talk about. So Dunning's fine at this cheap price point. And only 1 start, but he did have a 37% K rate that start too, and he had good stuff. He had good stuff if you were watching the game. So Dunning is definitely viable at only 4,500. That's pretty much it for the pitching. I think we can move on to the bats at this point. And we'll start with catcher. Catcher's never a fun position. I always say it, but just fill in whatever's left at catcher. You should not be filling out your catcher position first. Whatever you have left at the end, you plug in a catcher for the most part, unless you're just really making a specific stack. Guys like Real Muto, you're going out of your way to play him on a Philly stack, but there's just not really many catchers that you're going to build around. But Will Smith, 3,700, going against Kyle Gibson. Looks like the Dodgers are going to be one of the best stacks on the slate here. Gibson's not a terrible pitcher, but he's pretty much just a mediocre kind of guy. And look, the Dodgers tend to crush right-handed pitching, so I think Kyle Gibson's going to be in for a long day here, and they have the highest team total in the slate at 5.65 currently. There's no total out for the White Sox, and they're in a good spot versus Bubic, I apologize, I don't know how to say his name, to be honest, but I think the White Sox will have a decently high total, but I don't think it's going to be above 5.65, and if we're looking at Gibson splits, it's pretty similar across the board, same ice to the lefties, same ice to the righties, but the carry does come down to the lefties, and I'll side with the left-handed bats for the most part, but Will Smith's fine. He's got good power versus righties. 381 ISO last season. It wasn't limited time, but I think he's fine at 3,700. Then Yan Gomes, 3K. I like the Nats on this slate quite a bit. 5.5 implied team total, and Zach Godley's just not a very good pitcher. Low strikeout guy, and will give up power to both sides of the plate. So I think you can load up on the Nats once again. I know they didn't do much last night, but that's baseball. It's a high-variance sport, and I'm willing to go right back to the well on the Nationals. Or if it's Kirk Suzuki starting, whoever, I don't care. Both are fine options, but Yan Gomes projected to be in the lineup right now, and only 3K. I think he is fine. Prefer him versus lefties, but he's an okay option. Then Tucker Barnhart, 2,600, going up against Tyler Chatwood. Tyler Chatwood had a good start to the season, but after that, he has just not been good in the slightest. Now, looking at the power numbers last year, they were actually pretty low, but double-digit walk rate to lefties, a 357 WOBA compared to a 261 to the righties. So like all the lefties here for the Reds, and I actually think they make a pretty decent stack. They're also going to be in Cincy, which is a big hitter's park, so I think that's going to work out well for Tucker Barnhart. And the Reds do have a team total of around 5 today. So don't mind Tucker here. If you're looking at splits versus righties, 170 ISO, that's pretty much about it. He's got decent pop versus righties, but I like the price tag. Then dropping down to first base, we have Jose Abreu at 5,400. He's been one of the hottest batters on the entire planet recently, and he's facing a lefty. So he's going to be one of the top plays on the slate projection-wise. I'm not sure how easy it's going to be to fit him in, but if you got the money for him, I love it. 360 batting average to lefties last year, 232 ISO, 168 WRC plus. And if you look at his game log, he's just been on an absolute fire. So, like the White Sox, like Jose Abreu, no team total yet, but I have to imagine it's going to be one of the higher ones on the entire slate. Mitch Moreland here going up against the righty and Austin Voth, who's just not been that great this season. I think Boston and Nationals are once again a great game stack on this slate. They both have team totals of 5.5, and what the over-under would be at 11. So should be the highest over-under on the slate, unless I'm forgetting something off the top of my head. There's no course field here as well. So definitely like this game. It's probably where I'm going to want most of my bats for the most part, unless I'm targeting the Dodgers, but they're also very expensive, so it's not that easy to fit in the Dodgers. But Mitch Moreland, he crushes right-handed pitching. Looking at his splits, near 300 ISO, 549 slugging. And looking at both splits, the K rate last year, which was a smaller sample size, but 33% to righties and only 16% to lefties. And power to both sides of the plate here. So I think the whole Red Sox lineup is in play, but I love Moreland versus right-handed pitching. Howie Kendrick, he's great versus lefties and righties. Prefer him versus lefties where the numbers are just really, really good, but still versus righties are fine. Only a 12% K rate, 327 batting average, high ground ball rate, which does dip down to the lefties. So I prefer him versus lefties, but still, I mean, he's fine at this price tag, and he hits both handedness of pitching very well. And Zach Godley is a very low strikeout pitcher, and Boston's pitching staff has been very bad this year. Then Edwin Encarnacion, 3,800. I guess we can call him the light version of Jose Abreu. He's just not been as good this season, but he comes in quite a bit cheaper and should be hitting right nearby him. And he's got plenty of power versus lefties. If you're looking at his splits, 349 ISO to them last season and near 600 slugging. So definitely thinking Edwin Encarnacion is in play at that price tag. And then dropping down to second base, we have Max Muncy at 5K. So I don't love paying this much for Muncy, or just really for all these Dodgers, but they're certainly stackable on the slate. And if you're playing Dan Dunning, you can fit them in, so that's kind of, I guess if you're going to go like the Woodruff Dunning route, you can pretty much play whatever bats you want. So if you're doing that, I think these Dodgers are certainly playable. They have the highest team total on the slate. They crush right-handed pitching. Muncy's fine versus either side of the plate. He's got a 261 ISO to lefties and a 267 ISO to righties. Overall, prefer him versus righties, but the splits are fine either way. And I think he's an okay option if you got the money for him. Same goes for Mike Moustakas at 4,800. I think the Cincinnati lefties are certainly viable on this slate. They're not my favorite stack, and I don't love paying nearly 5K for Mike Moustakas. But this is a good park for lefty power, and he's got obviously some fine splits versus righties, including a 264 ISO, and he's good versus lefties too. So you can play him. It doesn't really matter who to throw out there, but we know it's going to be Tyler Chatwood, and he does struggle with lefties. So I like Mike Moose Knuckles here. And then we have a cheap option in Danny Mendick at 2,800. He's actually been hitting pretty well, so I'm not really sure why he's this cheap. His price has came up a little bit. He was near the bare minimum, but at 2,800, I still think he's like a pretty fine value here versus a lefty. So don't mind Mendick, and I would imagine the White Sox are going to be one of the better stacks on this slate. They have crushed left-handed pitching this season. I believe they have an ISO above 300. So they've been one of the best left-handed. They've been one of the best teams versus left-handed pitching so far this season offensively. Then dropping down to third base, we have one of my favorite plays in Rafael Devers. Austin Voth is going to struggle a bit with the lefties, and Devers absolutely crushes right-handed pitching. They have one of the highest team totals on the slate, so definitely like Devers here. He's expensive, but 4,700. It's not like we're paying 5K plus for him. Should be pretty easy to fit in. If you want to make him a corner, or what's the word for it? A core piece of your lineup. I don't mind that. And if you're looking at his numbers last year, he had a 153 ISO or 153 WRC plus to righties, over a 400 WOBA, near 300 ISO. So I like the spot here for Rafael Devers. As Drupal Cabrera, he feels a bit expensive, and he hasn't really done too much lately. But again, I like all the Washington Nationals bats here versus Zach Godley, and he actually has some more power versus righties compared to lefties. So as Drubal's fine, it's just for only 200 more, I can get Rafael Devers, which in my opinion is a much better play. Then we have Luis Urais here at 3K. Should be leading off versus Stephen Brolt. He did lead off last time they faced a lefty, I believe. And he actually didn't do too bad. I remember playing him. I forget what his price tag was. I think he was in the 2K. Was he in the 2K range? Price came up a little bit, but still dirt cheap here. He's got some decent splits versus lefties, including a 351 batting average, of 136 WRC plus, and a 378 WOBA. Not a lot of pop in his bat, but I think he's a fine option here versus Stephen Brolt, who really does struggle with right-handed bats. A 184 ISO, 351 WOBA, 17% strikeout rate, and a double-digit walk rate. So definitely like the righties here versus Stephen Brolt. Shortstop is once again loaded. I would recommend spending up for a shortstop and finding value elsewhere today. But Tim Anderson versus lefty is fine. I like the White Sox on this slate. And Chris Bubic is not a guy that's really been scorching the earth this year so far. Now he's a young pitcher, so obviously but the potential is there. But so far, I would just give the advantage to the White Sox, who crush left-handed pitching. He had a 330 batting average to lefties this year, and he's been hitting the ball very well. So, like Tim Anderson, I just hate the price tag. Trey Turner, 5,400. I feel like I'd rather just play Corey Seager at 5,100, but I love this Nationals game, or love the Nationals team. I like the Nationals game, them and the Red Sox, but love the Nat stack on this slate. He's good versus lefties and versus righties. Actually had more power to righties last season, and he's got that stolen base upside as well. So, don't mind Trey Turner here. And if you're looking at godly splits, he's got a 213 ISO to lefties, 181 to righties, and a very low strikeout rate to both sides of the plate. So everyone's in play here for Washington. Corey Seager, he's been hitting the wall so well so far this season. I believe he was one of the highest. He had one of the highest barrel rates as well. So he's been really squaring up the ball. And look, at 5,100, he's expensive, but I think he's fine here. He crushes right-handed pitching, and they have the highest team total on the slate. Yeah, last year he had a 239 ISO to righties, 126 WRC plus, 289 batting average, but this season he's been phenomenal, and Kyle Gibson is kind of just a mediocre pitcher for the most part. So definitely like Corey Seager at that price tag. I mean, I say price tag, but he's not like he's 5,500, 5,400 like Trey Turner and Tim Anderson. So I like a little bit of a discount you get between those two guys. Xander Bogaerts, 4,900. He homered last night, and I prefer the lefties here versus both, but Bogaerts is fine versus both sides of the plate, and he's pretty much in play if you're just stacking Boston. I'm not sure if I'd really one-off of him, because I'd rather play a guy like Corey Seager as a one-off, but he's fine in Boston stacks for sure. Then we have Hori Polanco at only 4,600. Going against Casey Mize. So I say only, but just comparing it to guys like Tim Anderson, Trey Turner, Corey Seager, Xander Bogaerts, he's a bit cheaper. I mean, he's about $1,000 cheaper than Tim Anderson, and I always like Polanco versus right-handed pitching. And the Twins, I'm not sure if they're going to go overlooked, but I think we can certainly use the lefties here. People might be scared off a little bit from Casey Mize because he was the number 1 overall pick in the draft, but he just doesn't look amazing so far. I mean, yeah, the potential is there, and he had 7 strikeouts on his first start, but versus the Cubs, the stuff didn't look amazing. It didn't. It wasn't great. I mean, I think there's definitely I think he's got a bright future, but I'm gonna give the advantage here to the Twins lefties, and Polanco's fine versus right-handed pitching. Looking at his splits, he had over a 200 ISO versus them last season, over a 300 batting average, and a low K rate. So don't mind Polanco. Then dropping down to the outfield, we have 2 really good spin-up options here in Juan Soto and Cody Bellinger. It's going to be tough picking between the two if you got the money for them, but I overall really like the Nats. Like, I like the Dodgers, but I feel like it's easier to stack the Nats because there's some cheaper pieces. Meanwhile, the Dodgers are pretty much almost all expensive. So I guess I'd lean Soto, but both are fine here. And the team totals really aren't that far off, 5.5 to 5.65. So I'll probably lean Soto, but I think he's an excellent option here. 300 ISO to righties, 416 on base percentage, 155 WRC plus. He's one of the best bats in the league versus right-handed pitching, and he's going up against a low strikeout pitcher in Zach Godley. Love Soto. I'm probably going to make him the thumbnail picture once again. Cody Bellinger, 5,400. He crushes right-handed pitching. Him and Juan Soto are one of the best righty smashers in the entire league. 645 slugging to righties, 167 WRC plus, 328 ISO, 416 on base percentage. Really similar numbers to Juan Soto, so like both options. If you're stacking the Nats, you use Soto. If you're stacking the Dodgers, you use Cody Bellinger. It's as simple as that. Max Kepler, for similar reasons that I mentioned with Hori Polanco. I loved using Max Kepler last season. I haven't really been using him as much this year, but he's still fine versus righties with over a 280 ISO to them, and 4,500 leading off, I think he's fine, especially if you're stacking the Twins. You can use him as a one-off, but I'd probably just prefer him in twin stacks. Alex Verdugo, 4,500. This is just another lefty bat versus Austin Voth, and I love this game stack, so Verdugo is certainly in play leading off. Eddie Rosario is basically the same exact play as Max Kepler, so I'm not going to bore you going too in-depth with it, but like literally the same play, just a little bit cheaper. And he hits cleanup. Jesse Winker, he's been hitting the ball very well this season. I do prefer the lefties here versus Tyler Chatwood. Looking at Winker's splits last season, he had over a 230 ISO versus right-handed pitching, 360 on base percentage, and this year he's been awesome. He's coming off a 35-point game, I think 2 games ago, or 3 games ago, I can't remember exactly, but yeah, I like Winker here. Been hitting the ball very well, and he obviously has really good splits versus righties. Ryan Braun, he was scratched with back tightness, I believe, last night, so no idea if he's going to end up making the lineup, but if he does, I love righties versus Stephen Brolt. The Brewers have an implied team total of over 5. And Ryan Braun's got great splits versus lefties, a 287 ISO and a 573 slugging. And last time he faced a lefty, he did go deep. So Braun is certainly playable for me. And we'll round it off with, or end this off with 3 outfielders in Jock Peterson, Rafael Garcia, and Adam Eaton. Jock Peterson, anytime he faces a righty, he is certainly in play, like the Dodger stack here. And look, he sucks versus lefties. Just look at the splits. There's dark red bars here, but to righties, over a 300 ISO, 571 slugging, so he's a fine option just to throw on a Dodger stack, but just know there's always pinch hit risk with Jock Peterson if they bring in a lefty. Then Rafael Garcia, 3,600, similar reasons to Ryan Braun, not as good versus lefties as Ryan Braun is, but still a 185 ISO, 107 WRC plus. They're okay numbers, but look, I like all the righties here versus Stephen Brolt. He just really struggles with right-handed bats. Then Adam Eaton, 3,200, just the cheap lefty here versus Zach Godley. I like all the Nats on this slate, so he is certainly a play at his cheap 3,200 price point. Not a lot of power in that bat, but certainly someone that knows how to get on base. But I think that's going to be it for the video, guys. I hope it was helpful. If it was, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. I really do appreciate it. And I hope you guys enjoy your Sunday.